he gets a reaction.
Yeah.
I'll tell you in 3 weeks when I get my second one. I just had my first Pfizer 4 days ago.
All
Morning,
right.
Ray.
Well, we went up there now.
Good morning.
Morning, Don.
Is that John?
That's Don. Don sitting there in the Aurora Borealis. Yep.
Oh, yeah, I can see
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Okay, doing. Yes, Barb. Hi, Barb. Hi, Tom.
And where's Ray? Ray's
Hello,
in front of a lake, correct?
How's everybody?
Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Hello,
Tom.
everybody.
Good morning, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Hi there.
I got your email, Tom, about Tom Weir.
Hi, Wendy.
Interesting, eh?
Morning.
Morning, Wendy.
Bay Area wine companies are now planning to go public, according to the San Francisco
Somebody has their radio playing in the
Vintage
background.
wines.
I think that's Don. Tom, do you guys have any
Here's
snow today?
Wendy. Hi, Wendy.
No snow today, no.
Okay, that's good.
It's been a lovely day here today.
Beautiful.
Snow disappeared
How
in the last week.
about you, Wendy? Have you got snow?
Yeah, but we do have snow, but it hasn't snowed for quite a long time. It's glorious today. It's like +6 or something like that.
Good for
We've
you.
got snow. We had it yesterday and the day before
Uh-oh,
this week.
uh-oh. You know, it's only really snowed twice here, December 21st, and then about 2 weeks ago, we got enough to shovel, and then just a few flurries here and there
Oh.
after that.
Oh,
It's been a
right.
crazy winter. Yeah, my yard looks like that one.
Yeah, Ohio really got hit hard.
Yeah, yeah.
That
That's
sounds
like I am.
Oh, God, so it looks
Oh,
cold.
snow.
Yeah.
It's actually 32 and it's ready to get the bathing suits out. My gosh, it's actually looks like it's melting.
It does.
Yep, ours is melting for sure. My driveway's got a big swoosh of ice across it because the downspout, there's stuff off the roof and the side yard that's all kind of draining into my driveway. So I have to go out there later and chip some of the ice off. Or push the slush away, whichever it is.
So,
Oh, hi,
Tom,
Chris.
how are things in Scotland?
Hello, Chris.
Yeah.
Quite pleasant just now.
Yeah, Tom, how are things in Scotland?
Quite pleasant just now.
Are they?
It's about 9-10 degrees today.
Nice.
Good.
Very bright, sunny. To be wet tomorrow and the day after.
Yeah.
So today was summer.
I know. Here too.
Yeah, you too.
Good morning, Chris.
There's Janice as well. Morning, Janice and Chris.
Hi, Janice.
Oh,
Good
welcome.
evening.
Good evening, I should say to you guys.
Yeah.
Somebody's got a radio going or something in the background.
Yeah, not me.
No, not me either.
So you look good in flannel today, Wendy. I see
Oh,
it.
thank you. Yeah, I've got my lumberjack shirt on today.
You smell it though? Did you smell it?
Okay, here
Oh,
comes
Jack. How's Jan doing?
He's connected. He hasn't connected to audio yet. Here he goes.
Yeah. Jack, how is Jan doing?
Well, she's asymmetric. Is that what they call it? Asymmetric?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Neither one of us are sick. The only reason we know she's positive is she had to take that test prior to getting the test. I mean, getting the procedure done.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy. But we both had the shots. Hey, maybe the shots work, guys.
Yeah.
Let's hope so.
Well, if they don't, we've wasted a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, it's 11 o'clock in the strike of the bell, and so I'm going to start. Today we're going to go to a trip that I took over a 2-year period, and and I went to Argentina, Uruguay, and Chile area for about a month each time, and I compiled them together. So it's a little bit of a different trip. So the first thing to show you is where Argentina is, because you can see there in the world below, obviously Brazil, Bolivia, and next to Chile, but it's a very, very long country. Surprisingly, how large it is. You look at it on the map, and I didn't have a clue. So when we flew into Buenos Aires. And so Buenos Aires, as you can see there, is in the mouth of the very large bay. But what you also see is that there are a lot of rivers that go all the way into Paraguay, Uruguay, parts of Brazil that all seem to go back down into this bay. So it's a very large confluence of rivers and that send fresh water down. Obviously not as big as the Amazon, but interesting. So as we go into Argentina, one of the things to point out is that in the early days, meaning about 100 years back, how Argentina grew was that it was the fruit basket of Europe. So in the wintertime, when England and Scotland and Germany were very cold, obviously Argentina being south of the equator was warm. So they had fruits and vegetables that they could sell to the Europeans. So even in the days of the sailing ships, everything would be commerce going between South America and Europe. And so you're going to see some architecture and some things, and it's hard to believe that they built this, or most people have never seen it, but it was the difference in the weather between Europe and so here we are in Buenos Aires. In Buenos Aires, the first week we arrived, I ended up renting an apartment, and it was on the 7th floor because I was advised that in the summertime, which is our winter, which meaning that it was in January time period, in the summertime, you want to be high up because in the cities, you don't get a lot of air movement. So they have a lot of trees at the bottom first 2 or 3 floors. So I ended up getting this 7th floor condo, and we spent about a week there just hanging out in Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires is one of those fabulous towns, so easy to get around because taxis everywhere. You can hardly walk outside with taxis, almost more than regular cars. One of the sites that you're going to see a few of the touristy type sites in Buenos Aires. This is one of my favorites. It was a flower sculpture. It's made of steel and aluminum, and it ends up closing in the evening and opening in the morning. So it's a mechanical structure that the motors drive open and close. It's 65 feet tall. But the interesting part is in the evening time, they light it, and it's just absolutely gorgeous piece of architecture in the middle of the town. So Buenos Aires is, as I said before, actually, or Argentina, a relatively wealthy area. And so the architecture you're going to start seeing is very influenced by Europe. And it was originally called, Buenos Aires was called the Paris of South America because of the architecture. I grabbed this picture to give you some kind of an idea. This picture was taken in 1915, and this was the original harbor area. And so because the boats could come in, but it was relatively shallow water. So they had to build a harbor and dredge it out even in the early 1900s to be able to get the big ships in so they could send fruits and vegetables off to Europe. But this was the harbor area. And this is what the harbor area of Buenos Aires now looks like. This is called Puerto Madero, and it's their financial center. It's the main hub area. But these two pictures, the first one that I showed you, this one is like 100 years difference, but you can see the similarity between the two of them. So Puerto Madero is as beautiful and as modern as any normal city is. Buenos Aires is just such a different. There's so many differences. What I'm trying to say between the towns. This is very modern because it's now the financial center. This again is the financial center. All the new buildings in Buenos Aires. And it was all built in the 1990s with local and foreign investments. One of the things that I enjoy about Buenos Aires is they really know how to blend old and new. So huge amount of fabulous architecture, but they've added a lot of detail to it. So when I was down there, it was 2012. So we're here going into a restaurant, and what the Argentinians are known for, obviously, is their meats. So this restaurant, you walk in and you can see these huge fires going with the meats being prepared, and then they cut them off and give you pieces of them. This is, again, very touristy kind of stuff in Buenos Aires, but this is the oldest national monument in Buenos Aires, and it celebrates what is called the May Revolution, which was the Argentine War of Independence of 1810. This is an obelisk on the main drag in Buenos Aires, and it was built, interestingly enough, in 1936 by a German company called Siemens. for the Argentinians, and being that it's 1936, this is in the middle of the war. Again, downtown Buenos Aires, a church, a Catholic church, beautiful Catholic church. This one was built in 1872. It was a place where Juan Perón would attend his masses. The architecture, I mean, it's as beautiful as any Austrian Vienna, whether you're in Vienna or whether you're in Paris. Architecture is absolutely just stunning. Here's an interesting old place that I really sought out, and it was it's now a cafe. Doesn't look like much from the inside, and they really wouldn't let you take pictures from the inside, but I was able to find one off the internet. This was kind of an old picture of what the inside of this cafe looked like. So you could go inside and have lunch, and the architecture is just stunning. Buenos Aires City Hall, you can see it's like if you close your eye, this could be Paris very easily. I mean, here we have massive oak doors. I mean, again, architecture is just is timeless. The architecture, not just the architecture, but the workmanship. It was all European workmanship because they were all the people coming from whether it was France, Germany, Scotland, England. But these are obviously the hinges of the doors. This is an interesting site in Buenos Aires. We call our government house the White House, but the people in Brazil call it the Pink House. It's the Casa Rosada. And this is the main power area. They have a fence around their red pink house like we now have around our White House to keep people at a distance. This is the Pink House, and this was also where you could walk around and go see it. But this is where Eva Perón supposedly in the upper second floor window would come out and do her proclamations. But this is the White House or Pink House. One of the interesting things here is that near the Pink House on the boulevards you're walking around, you see this insignia. And this is the white shawl of the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo, which symbolizes the diapers of their lost children from the 1970s. Because in the 1970s and 80s, Argentina had a really tough time. They had a crazy leftist people that kidnapped people, killed them. Anyway, it's a terrible time period. But you see this insignia in many different areas of Buenos Aires. The Cervantes Theater comes from 1921. It was built by a Frenchman. Again, spectacular architecture. Not all of their old architecture is in really great shape because they haven't spent a lot of money. But again, just a lot of beautiful architecture though. So here we are down in the subway, because to get around the town of Buenos Aires, the easiest way is the subway. And it's a very convenient subway, very cheap, because like most parts of the world, you got to move a lot of people very quickly, very cheap. Here we have for Yossi and a few of my Jewish friends, this is my friend Jamie, who was with me, and he wanted to go see the Jewish church, and this was originally laid in 1897, and it took 35 years to build, and it was inaugurated in 1932, which is again right in the middle of the war, but it's a spectacularly beautiful Jewish church. This is an area, Buenos Aires has really interesting areas. This is called Caminito, and Caminito is very much of an artsy area. And I found a picture of what it originally looked like. This was in 1960. This is the same building that you see here. So you could see the difference. 1960, it was, they were barely going into that tough period, 1970, 1980, when the leftist, the Peronists took over. But this is what it looked like. Now what it looks like is all of the buildings in that area are painted different colors. And it turned out that to make the area look interesting, they had ships that would be coming in, and the guys who painted the ships always had extra paint left over. So because they had no money, they would paint their houses different colors. And as time went along, it became more and more interesting. There's my wife. We're checking out the cuisine of one of the cafes we stopped at. My friend Jamie here, because Argentina and the Caminito area of Buenos Aires is known for tango. So there's people standing around that would love to tango with you. And so Jamie did a little bit of tango with one of the ladies. So as we're walking around this Caminito area, we saw this this mural, and to some it doesn't mean much, but the man's name is Diego Maradona, and he was regarded as the greatest football or soccer player of the time of 1980. So Jamie, who was a soccer fan, was very impressed with us. So we took this picture, and no more than about 10 yards away from this picture, here is Diego Maradona standing there himself. He's gained a few pounds. He's obviously no longer the soccer player he was. And so we were able to see him in the actual man. Unfortunately, Diego Maradona died in 2020 of a heart attack. Anyway, he is now dead, but so we were able to see him. We were able to see him at the time. So we left this area here. My wife loves shawls. And so here was a lady making silk shawls or silk scarves. So obviously we bought a half a dozen or so, but it was just fun to watch her put these beautiful silk scarves together. Again, a shopping area in Buenos Aires. I mean, they really know how to do it well. They keep the old architecture above, and then they put the new buildings down below. One of the interesting things everybody has to do is when you're in Buenos Aires is go see where Eva Perón was buried. So here we have the cemetery of Eva Perón. She was born in 1952, which some of us were alive already then. And she died in 1982. So she was only 30 years old, but this is her actual grave or memorial site for her. But it's one of those things I had to go see, where was Eva Perón buried? One of the things I enjoyed was seeing the old French cars. This was an old Citroen air-cooled front engine car that they built starting in about 1948 on, and they called it a two-steam horse because in those days you were taxed based on the amount of horsepower you had. And so this thing is totally underpowered, but it's just a classic old car, and you can see it's still in pretty good shape. So that evening we went out to eat. This is a typical Argentinian restaurant. Nobody eats before 9 o'clock. So we'd get there at 9 o'clock and we'd be one of the first ones to be able to get a space, but it's almost a communal setting in many of the Argentinian restaurants. This is another district in Buenos Aires called San Telmo, and this is an area that on the weekends they had a garage or a market and a crafts sale. And so here my wife is buying what are called orange peel boxes. These are small boxes that they build from taking in orange and turning it inside out and then decorating it. We still have it. It's an amazing little artwork, and every woman has to have a purse, so she only has 222. So this is one more. This is 223, but this one is from Buenos Aires, and so here we have a handmade, beautiful Buenos Aires or Argentinian purse. Here we want to go see where the horse races and the polo people are. So here is one of the huge horse racing venues in Buenos Aires. This was built in 1876. So the inside of it is pretty modern. You can see my friend Elaine there to the right walking towards us. But we sat there and watched a couple of the races, but this is the venue looking out, a beautiful horse track. So there was a couple of small races, which was interesting to watch. As we left that evening, we walked outside and were able to grab just a beautiful picture of the outside of this place. And then you obviously want to eat. So this is another one of those Argentinian absolute beyond anything that I can describe. Steaks that the best restaurant in America almost doesn't taste as good as what the Argentinian meat does. It's so flavorful, but this is a typical meal out. So here, I'm going to show you quickly a picture. This is a satellite picture. Obviously, I didn't take, but the white part there you can see is Buenos Aires. To the upper right area, that is Uruguay. Between Uruguay and Buenos Aires, you can see all the river areas. And I mentioned before, all of these rivers that flow into this bay, which flow into the ocean. So right now, I hope you can see my pointer, but this river right here is what we're going to be going up. Okay, so there's no real name for it, but there's a town up here called Tigre, which you're going to see in a second. And this is where we're heading, up this small little river. So to get up there, we had to take a railroad, and we had to find the the train. So we get up to this little town called Tigre, and Tigre is not connected to the Amazon, but it's this little river that goes up. A very interesting town, because in Tigre, the only way to get around is by boat. And these are the boats that are considered the buses of the area. So many people live on the river, so you would jump on it. So we asked, where could we go? And he said, well, just get off wherever you want. And I said, okay. So first place we got off as we're going up this river is the Buenos Aires Rowing Club from 1873. So this was originally built by the British at that time. So you can see they already recognized what a beautiful area it was, because the architecture they built up this river is staggering. But this was built in 1870. Here we have the Club de Regata La Marina, and it's a private club, and it's basically a rowing club, but it's again built up this river. So as we go up the river, you can see these homes. I mean, they're spectacular, beautiful homes. Here we have again the Tigre Sailing Club. It was founded in 1896. Again, just, you know, it's just hard for me to believe that all this stuff is up this little crummy river. But here we go a little bit farther up, and what do we run across? The Tigre Art Museum that was built in 1890. You know, stuff that I'd never seen pictures of, never seen anything. But you come driving up the river, and you come across this architecture that is as beautiful as anything that you'll see in Europe. But by the way, this art museum originally was designed to be built a casino, and it was a casino until 1933, until the beginning of the World War II. So this little taxi, as it's going up the river, we would stop at these little outbuildings, and what the outbuildings were for the residents who lived there. The number one thing that they had to get was fresh water, because as you can see, all the water there is fresh, but it's not clean water to drink. So the residents are always lugging liquids up and down the river to get fresh water. There you can see one of the residents standing there with his 5-gallon cans, waiting to get on the taxi to be able to get fresh water for his house. There's my wife near the end of the taxi ride, but you can see it's just a bus ride up the river. So at the end of the river, we found this restaurant, beautiful little restaurant, and it was built in 1898, but it wasn't a restaurant. It was just originally somebody's house that they converted into a restaurant because it was at the end of the river area. Just a typical house with little buildings so that you would wait. A gas station on the river. So if you needed gas, you would just get it. Just, again, a beautiful little building. So where we're going to go to now is, you saw Buenos Aires, that little inlet that is coming in. So we're now going over to where the red star is. And what that is the Mendoza region of Argentina, and especially to a little valley called the Yuko Valley. And the Yuko Valley produces some of the best wines that Argentina has. And it has wineries that this place, you will not have a hard time understanding this, but everything that you see, that lake is above, everything was built below it. So their storage area is built below it. The lake is built above it. So these are all the structures, the air vents, and the elevators to go down into the ground. So underneath this winery is this huge cavern, as you can see, just full of casks of wine, just waiting to be aged. I mean, it's wineries that I've never seen size of these wineries before. So wine tasting in Argentina is lunch. They don't just wine taste, you always have lunch and wine taste. So this was the winery. And so you sit, my friend Elaine there in the right, and on the right, she's explaining things to some of the other people that are there, but it's just a great place to wine taste. So the Yuko Valley is the background of the Yuko Valley are the Andes Mountains. And it has 250 days a year of sunshine, and their average temperature is 57 degrees. So you can see it's a very good wine growing region. Another winery we stopped at, this guy right here, his name is Jimenez Really, and he has a small winery, but again, he gave us a tour of his place. And so when you finish, you sit down outside and he makes a little bit of lunch for you and your wine tasting. his grapes. These are his wines, the Jimenez really, and you can actually find them at Bevmo. So here is the backdrop to another winery. I took this picture from the winery's picture because they have accommodations at this winery that if you want to spend a couple of days there, these are the accommodations, and you can see the backdrop or the Andes. These are again my pictures, but this is the same winery. It's called the Atamisk Winery. Structure. I mean, they obviously built this to last. It's a solid concrete. So as you're walking around the winery, they have these stainless steel vats, and if you'd like to try a little bit of their wine, you just walk over with your glass and open the tap, and nobody's telling you that you need to have only this much. You can go back as many times as you want. So these are the wines that were being produced at that winery. So obviously, you go to Argentina, one of the things that I wanted to do was polo, right? And so I wanted to learn how to play polo. First of all, I don't like horses. I figured I do have to get past that. So they got me onto a horse, put me into a polo outfit. And so we started to have some lessons. Here's my friend Jamie and I, where they're trying to tell us how we hold the mallet and what we do with the horses. And anyway, it was one of those amazing days out on an Argentinian ranch learning to play polo. And so they put us into a match amongst each other. It was very, very crude, but it gave you the feeling of playing polo. So I know not much about horses, but how do you check a horse's tooth? So the guy had a toothache. And so I didn't know this, but they put this giant clamp in their mouths. They take their two front hooves and they tie them together. And then they put the clamp in their mouth and they open them up because the guy, you can see barely, he's got a drill. He's drilling the guy's teeth. Anyway, it was just, for me, it was interesting. Here I am, obviously very proud of my horse and my mallet. Anyway, so as we leave the area of playing polo for a day or so, one of the last things you have to do is eat. And so we walked into this restaurant, and so my wife gets basically a ribeye and I get a New York. And so we asked him, could we split it? And this is the first time I've ever seen this, where the waiter comes over and I said, stop. And he's taking 2 spoons, and the meat is so tender that he is taking, with the spoon's edges, he is cutting the meat so I can get a piece of my wife's and she can get a piece of mine. I mean, it's hard to understand. I'm going to pause just quickly if anybody has any questions or thoughts.
So Barry, what time of year was this again?
It was in late January, early February, because that's their summertime, because they're in opposite seasons, and it would have cut into my boating time if it would have been in the summer. So you can't have that. So it had January, February.
Bernie, did you see any signs of the mothers protesting? Seemed like they had one day a week they'd go down and protest when I was there, but that was in the late 90s.
I didn't see that. It was mostly that insignia that you would see everywhere because they didn't want to forget their kids. It was it's a remembrance.
All right, we saw it. We saw them protesting.
Did you?
I think it was a Tuesday.
It's always a Tuesday.
They just walk around. You know the square where the pink house is, the pink palace is. They walk around the square that's near there. It's like the mothers. They wear the white head scarf.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
It was a terrible time for Argentina.
Yeah. All these people just went missing.
Yeah.
We were there 2016, wasn't it?
Hmm.
And Chris, these were taken, most of these pictures I took was 2012, 2013. So
It hasn't altered much.
no.
We recognized a lot of the places.
Yeah, it's Buenos Aires is underrated. I mean, for people to go because it's such a beautiful town, and it's a place that you just want to spend some time.
We had there 3 days.
About 3 or 4 days.
We only had about 3 days there.
Well,
That
if
was at
you-
the end of a trip, so we were at the end of the Argentinian bit. So
there's an
Yeah.
interesting website where you can see airplanes flying around the world, and I view it once in a while. It's interesting. So when you see it from the equator south, there's so few airplanes flying from the equator south, from coming from the north flying to the south, right? So the northern area from the equator north, the world is very busy. But when you go from the equator south, people forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, the thing that amazed me the most is that being naive, I thought it would be a very highly Mexican population. But I felt like I was standing on a corner in New York City. I mean, so many blondes and so many, you know, Caucasians and so forth. And then I looked up the immigration, and it was the same as the United States in the early 1900s.
Well, after the war, where did all the
Germans.
German crazies go? The Nazis, they all went there because, you know, they couldn't stay in Europe, but I mean, the Europe of the South, which was Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay. I mean, they were just
Yeah, even during the potato famine and what was that, the late 1800s, early 1800s in the UK area, thousands of immigrants came to the United States and some thousands came to Argentina.
Be a lot of going up that river valley. There seemed to be like a bit of British influence there in the architecture of some of the homes.
Yeah, heavy. I mean, lots of British influence from the late 1800s. I don't know all the history, Elspeth, of why and what for, but I do know that it was all driven by mostly the fruits and the vegetables, because, you know, obviously you can't grow anything in England in the wintertime. And so, or you can't do it in Germany or France. And so, I mean, I'm sure that all the money went south to that part of the world, and they copied the architecture. But yeah, lots of British influence. Okay, I'm going to continue. So here we ended up leaving Buenos Aires, and we took the ferry. This is the ferry that goes across from Buenos Aires over to Uruguay and across that bay. So you could see there's Buenos Aires, and the red star is the town of Colonia right across, and that is in Uruguay. It's a short little jump across, and then you can see Montevideo and Punta del Este. Those are the 3 places we're gonna go to next.
Barry, I'm not getting the picture. I still have the mountain picture.
Does everybody have the map picture? Or
yes,
Yeah.
We're current. I'm current. I got the map.
We get
I have
the
the
map.
map.
okay,
I have the map.
it could be unfortunately, it could probably your internet.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I can listen.
I apologize. You may just want to refresh. So here's my friend Jamie, who I was on the trip with, and we're in this town called Colonia. And this was an interesting picture only for sailors, because this is a West Coast sailing magazine. So we're saying we're here with a sailing magazine and we're here with a yacht club. So Colonia is an interesting little town in Uruguay. It was Portuguese, started by the Portuguese in 1680. So it's a very old architectural town. It looks like you're in Mexico somewhere, but it's just a great town. So we ended up finding a hotel, which is just this beautiful little hacienda. So here we are sitting in the plaza, the center area. The town itself of Colonia, they originally had built a wall around it, and to keep themselves safe from any of the marauders. And these are the walls still left over. So the town of Colonia, very interesting. We love being there. It's so eclectic because what you end up having is a free for all, basically. So the restaurants, like they're not, this is obviously pre-COVID, but everybody's in the streets with their little cafes. But it makes it very, very comfortable. So they took some of the old cars, which I found interesting, and they cut them open, and they, part of the restaurant here, we sat inside here, my friend Jamie sitting there, and because we were able to have some drinks. This picture doesn't mean anything to you probably, except that just a quick synopsis here. We're in Uruguay, and that ferry that you saw us take across, I see that man that's sitting across from me on the ferry, and I didn't know who he was, but I knew him. And so after a few minutes, I walked over to him, and he turns out to be a councilman from the city of Fresno, and his name was Ron Bronquillo. And I remember when I used to have my property in Fresno, I would go see him. And once in a while, he didn't know me, he didn't remember me, but it was just amazing. On a ferry going from Buenos Aires to Uruguay, I meet a councilman from Fresno. So anyway, we had dinner that night, but that's him sitting there and his wife. So another thing, obviously eating is part of it. So Anthony Bourdain, which we all know, many years ago, he used to do these travel shows. And so it was always part of, and I traveled, I would always use him as a base for eating. So one of the things that he always talked about when he was in Uruguay is a thing called a Shavito. And a Shavito, this is a Shavito. And a Shavito is nothing more than, it looks like everything that you have in your refrigerator put onto a hamburger bun. And it's just, it's unbelievable that anybody could eat it, but you can see what it was. But Anthony Bourdain always made a big deal out of Shavitos in Uruguay. So we had to go to the restaurant where he was at. This is the coastline of Uruguay. This is in the town of Montevideo, which is a beautiful town. Many Europeans come here for the summer, obviously, because it's cold in Europe. And so these high rises are mostly the European hotels and European condos. But beautiful coastline. As you can see the back of Anne's head and my friend Elaine there, but they have a walkway we'd walk along. This is looking the other direction along the beaches. You can see obviously not very crowded, and just because most Americans never think about going south to go to a beautiful beach, but here in the wintertime is the Uruguayans. So in Montevideo, one of the things to see obviously is the theater. This is a spectacularly beautiful theater in Montevideo. The inside of it, they gave us a tour. We're able to see the inside. I mean, it's an opera house still obviously being used. So Montevideo, this is the Montevideo Airport. Very modern, very nice. So, you know, you think of Uruguay and you don't always think of modern, beautiful places, but it's a first-class place. So Montevideo has a yacht harbor, so we had to go see what the boats look like. Then Montevideo also has an older section. This is the Old Town area. And in the Old Town area, they have a large area of restaurants. And so this
can you
building
come back in about an hour? What time is it?
This building was full of restaurants. So these restaurants.
Where are you calling from?
Anne. It's my wife on the other line. Anyway, this is a restaurant in Montevideo, and this is how they cook. It's all wood fired, and there's myself, Jamie, and my wife drinking, obviously. And you know, meat is the absolute necessity with every meal in that part of the world. And you can see these grills here to the left. They've got this horrendous fire going that is constantly running all the time. And then the hot coals fall down, then they pull them across underneath. But the food is just, it's second to none. It's probably some of the best food I've ever had. This is pork, beef, and lamb intestines, which I know a lot of people don't like, but it's something I like. And so in one of these little restaurants, we also ended up getting some, the Italians called it Parma schinken or Italian sliced ham, but they've got these hams hanging from the ceilings. You can see it to the right of man's head. Anyway, it just makes a really good appetizer with a nice glass of wine or a beer. Typical Argentinian paella. We're just sitting inside. So Punta del Este, we're now leaving Montevideo, heading over to Punta del Este, is the hotsy-totsy area for the Europeans, because when they go on vacation in the wintertime, it's either to Southeast Asia or sometimes to Punta del Este, because I was only able to find this picture, and it's pretty crude, of Punta del Este. Not a big town, but beautiful, beautiful beaches. And so one of the famous things in Punta del Este is these 5 figures coming out of the sand. Just a beautiful, sorry, wrong direction. Beautiful area. Obviously, Punta del Este also has a yacht club. So we had to go see what the harbor looked like. So from Punta del Este here, or that area, we now ended up flying down to an area called Bariloche. And Bariloche is what they call the Lake District. It's a beautiful area. So it's called San Carlos de Bariloche. So when we arrived in Bariloche, we ended up renting a car because we wanted to go see the countryside. This was our hotel we stayed in, because a lot of people want to know where'd you stay with your wife? Well, it's different than when I stay by myself. But this is there's your typical wonderful hotel in Argentina. It's like 125, 150 bucks a night. It's no big deal, because again, very few tourists, American tourists or other than Europeans, go there. So it's really well priced. So as we're leaving Bariloche, this is the outskirts as we're heading into what's called the Lake District. And it's I don't know, you can obviously see how beautiful it is. There's a hotel that you're going to see in a second in the background. And this is a very European looking hotel, but the hotel is driven all around for golf. So you've got a beautiful 18-hole golf course. So, it's just the surroundings are just spectacular. It's called the Lala Hotel and Resort. It looks like something that you'd see in Yosemite. As you can see, there's almost no tourists, no people there. The sitting area, it's one of those beautiful areas. So obviously we had to have lunch there. We didn't spend the night because this place was $400 a night, and that was a little out of what I wanted to spend for a bed. So this is the Lala Hotel. This all around the Lala. I mean, it's just the surroundings are just second to none. So as we leave the Lala Hotel, you come upon one lake after another, because the Andes are all around you. So you get these beautiful mountains and these beautiful lake areas. Another place we stayed, another beautiful lake. It's after a while you go from one beautiful lake to the next beautiful lake, because it's just and you can see why many Americans go down there to fish, because these are pristine areas that very few people will actually go out and fish at. So I've got friends who fly fish, and these are the lakes that they love to fly fish in. So as we leave the Lake District, we're now heading into a little drier area. And again, these are some fishermen who are fishing, fly fishing. Now this picture could be in Arizona somewhere or New Mexico, but this is in southern part of Argentina. as we're driving. Again, another lake, but you can see it, everything changes from wet and lakey to dry and lakes. So from here, we ended up from Bariloche, we ended up taking a bus from Bariloche. We took a bus across the Andes, which was really interesting because there's no tunnels through the Andes, so you got to climb up into them. So this bus, as we're going, this picture here, I took out of the bus, obviously, and you can see the train tracks in the background, and they have bored holes for the trains, but the buses have to weave up the Andes Mountains on these switchbacks. So you can see we're halfway up, we're 3/4 way up, I can't remember, of the Andes, and we're looking down at the switchbacks of the trucks coming. Because this is one of the only ways that commerce can go from Chile to Argentina. They've got to cross the Andes. So this is the top of the Andes, and at the top of the Andes, what you end up having is a border check. So everybody's going to get out of the bus and get border checked. And so here's Jamie and I standing there after our border check. And we now come out of the mountains and we're now coming into Santiago. And Santiago, when we arrived, was one of the few places that I've ever stopped at where I had a hard time finding a hotel, because it turned out that there was a miners' convention that had just started in Santiago. And so almost every hotel was being taken. This building right here is the Chilean or the Santiago stock market. So this is inside the stock market in Santiago. They let us walk around. There was nothing going on that day. So in Santiago, this is the post office. So, I mean, a spectacularly beautiful building. This originally was built in 1846. It was built as a presidential palace, but it eventually became the post office. Top of the post office, you know, with postal workers, you can see their offices up there. I don't know what they need beautiful offices like this for, but this is the post office. So this was one of the old pharmacies in town. So it, you know, obviously just very, very interesting. So where we are going to now is near the tail end. We're in Chile, obviously, and there is in Chile, before they built the Panama Canal, everything had to go around the end of South America, where Eric did his presentation down at the bottom down here of Tierra del Fuego and Ushuaia and that. But there are no ports to stop. The only real port, or the first port, is where the arrow's pointing, and that port is called Valparaiso. And so in the days of even Columbus, as they were going around South America, this would be the port that they would stop. So up until the Panama Canal was put in, all commerce, when it came from Europe, came from the Far East, would have to stop in Valparaiso and then be transitioned across the Andes to go into Argentina. But the port, this was the port. So here's Valparaiso. And Valparaiso it's got, you can see obviously the port. It's a great little town. I ended up finding this bed and breakfast here on top of the hill, and I put the arrow to our room because the room from our view, the view from our room was looking down at the harbor, which was just very interesting. But Valparaiso is a large town. It's surprising, but you could see the architecture. It's a little European influenced, not as wealthy as Buenos Aires. I don't know why, I don't know the history of that. So the inner harbor, not well developed, but a lot of commerce, because all of the big ships, even now, if they're not going to go through the Panama Canal, Valparaiso is the way to get the commerce or to get the goods into the southern part of South America. So Valparaiso is very hilly. And one of the things that you'll see is that all the way through the town, everybody decorates everything in that town. So if there's a wall, they got a painting on it. as I said, that it's very hilly. So here we have the vernaculars that you will see all the way through the town. And these were all built in the early 1920s, 1930s, and they're still running. So these vernaculars, so if you want to get up the hill, you can either trudge your way up the hill or you can take one of these. It costs almost nothing, but they're kind of clunky and noisy and shaky, and you feel uneasy, except that you don't see them crashing. So it's a safe way to get up the hill. So here is the turnstile. You can see when this turnstile, I have no idea when this turnstile was made, but you can see this is probably 1920s, 1930s, a very old turnstile. So a cable, it's like the San Francisco cable cars. This is the wheel that turns the cable. And here's one of the vernaculars. You can see the steepness of it and the angle that they had to build to this little carriage up there so that you can get up the hill and keep you flat. This is what it looks like inside. There's my friend Jamie and his wife and my wife, but you can see the floorboards, you can see through them, and you can see how rickety it is, but still very functional. In Valparaiso, there's a very famous poet. His name is Pablo Neruda, and probably most of you have never heard of him, but he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1971. But he's very famous in Chile. This was where he did most of his writings, and it's a very famous building in Valparaiso. The next interesting place for me in Valparaiso was the Maritime Museum. So this is one of the best maritime museums I've ever seen in the world. And I didn't only put a few pictures in, but they have, because in the old days, in the 16, 17, 1800s, when they built a wooden ship, they always had to build models first. And all of the old models were kept by the Chileans, so they have them inside here. So it's really interesting to view this museum. So as we're going in the museum, one of the interesting things, if you remember, I don't know what year it was, but there was a mine disaster in Chile where the miners were trapped. And this was the tube that they put down, that they drilled into the earth, where they pulled one miner up at a time. So they have it inside the museum and you can stand in it. So I wanted to feel, what does it feel like for a miner to come from, a couple hundred feet underground in this tube to be brought up? But this was the capsule that came up in. This was one of our last evenings in Valparaiso, typical Chilean restaurant, just a very, very flavorful, very interesting. This was our last night. We're left Valparaiso. We're back in Buenos Aires again. We're ready to fly home. So what do we have to have? We have to have their amazing steaks, some amazing wine, a dessert, a creme brulee, my wife had to have. And we're now at the end. So there was our period of time visiting that part of the world. So
good job, Barry.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's Buenos Aires particularly.
Yeah, makes you want to go.
Oh, I'll say very good. Yeah,
makes me want to eat meat.
Barry, when we were hiking in Patagonia, when we went into Argentina, we get beef at a couple of the little places we're staying. Well, they'd never aged it. I mean, I think that you could see they strung up the cow outside and they started cutting meat because we couldn't get our teeth through it. It was like rubber. I mean, and it looked that great. It was lean. I mean, it looked, oh, this is going to be delicious. But we just couldn't. When I see you, Guy, when you talk about that guy getting through it with the 2 spoons, that was the exact opposite like we had. So we ended up we stuck to fish as much as we could just because of that. I mean, the meat looked delicious. The only thing I remember growing up in the UK was corned beef. A lot of corned beef came from Argentina.
Yeah, it's Eric, I would have to guess that the Argentinians, like anything, the Germans do not sell their wines very easily to anybody outside of Germany, right? And so
Right.
the Argentinians generally will sell their good wines and their blends and their good meats to Argentinians. Now you were probably in a tour group and they figured you've already paid for your trip, just give them a piece
Yeah,
of
we don't need to worry about that.
Probably.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
sorry, but
Oh,
it was Eric, it was the only time in my life where my wife and I almost every night we went out to eat, we drink a bottle of wine because
Okay,
So delicious.
oh my God, first it's cheap. Here, you go out to dinner and it's $10-12 for a glass.
yeah.
Well, there, if you spend $10 on a bottle, it might as well be the best wine that you've ever had.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had to buy the leather products when you're there. I'm glad your wife bought a purse.
Yeah.
We bought jackets while we were there, and they were very inexpensive, and I'm still wearing them.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jack, they're very, the leather goods are amazing down there. Obviously they got lots of beef, so they're bringing lots of hides and they're gonna do something with it. And
Yes.
it's the problem is when you travel, how much can you bring back?
Suitcase.
Yeah, exactly.
Buy another suitcase.
I always make my wife make packages. I take it to the post office and I mail it back because there's so much of it, right?
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
anyway, South America to me is just underrated by most people. They just don't think about going on vacation there.
Yeah.
Harry, I reckon South America is the best continent in the world
Yeah.
for scenery and variance.
Yep.
So we had 5 weeks. We did part of Brazil, whole of Chile, Argentina. Oh, we popped over to Uruguay for the day, the same as you. But our 5 weeks holiday was absolutely spot on.
Oh,
And the airports, even in Chile, the small ones, are so modern. It's amazing. And it's so easy and cheap to fly.
Well, my friend Harry, who is on this call right now, I was in Uruguay on a bus, and this is the days I had my tablet, and the buses have Wi-Fi in them, right? And so here, Harry is in San Jose having breakfast, and I have the tablet up against the window, and it's connected, and I said, watch this. And so he's watching as the bus is going. I mean, here you're lucky to clean.
I do remember that. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But once again, the buses are fantastic as well. We did several trips on them. And,
Yeah.
They were cheap and they were really top-rate buses.
Yep.
Did you go on a tour or did you just arrange it all on your own?
Well, we did a 3-week tour to begin with, and then I added on a week beforehand in Chile because I wanted to go to the Atacama Desert. And at the end of it, we added on a week in Brazil because obviously we thought we were only ever going to go there once. So we flew back in, well, we did the Agassiz Falls, both sides, Brazil and Argentina, then flew back to Sao Paulo, stayed a night there, and then we did a road trip to Paraty, which is an old colonial town midway between Sao Paulo and Brazil and Rio. And then we went by road from Paraty to Rio, had 3 nights in Rio, and then flew back to direct to Heathrow. Schiphol was when we did Ecuador. And I think we had 12 flights altogether from the UK around Chile, Argentina, etc.
yeah.
And it's probably the 3rd best holiday we've ever had, the best one being Nepal. But it was fantastic, and really, for the amount of money it cost, it's so cheap, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think everybody should go to South America and see as much as they can. I mean, Ecuador and Galapagos were fantastic as well.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to Peru and Bolivia because we've never been there. But obviously our plans have been thwarted for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, it's Anne, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
Well, our dad, before we were around, of course, and also before he was married, my dad was a sailor, and he'd been to Argentina and Brazil, been to Rio, Buenos Aires, and he came back with a mohawk haircut. That's strict. The only difference between nowadays is it wasn't coloured, it was just as normal. You know? And a couple of tattoos on his arms, of course, right?
Yeah.
And I remember one, I think it said Kathy on it, but I remember the first two letters looked as if they had been changed.
Oh.
Anyway,